Hello there. This is Mike from Muscle for Life, and I'm back with yet another episode of the podcast. And in this episode, I interview Jeff Alberts, who is an accomplished natural bodybuilder with about 3 decades of experience under his belt and 2 pro card wins, 16 class titles, 26 top 3 finishes, and he took first place in the 2014 IFPA Pro International. And as you would expect from someone with so much bodybuilding experience, Jeff is also an accomplished bodybuilding coach. He's been doing that for about 5 years now, and he has worked with hundreds of athletes, and he actually started the 3DMJ brand, which has now expanded to include 4 other coaches, including Andrea and Eric, who I also recently interviewed. So as you'll see in the interview, it's always great to talk to someone like Jeff, who really is a consummate professional, who has a ton of experience working with all different types of people, men and women, different ages, different circumstances, different genetics, has really just seen everything and knows what he's talking about. And in this case, what we talk about are the major lessons that Jeff has learned about what changes as you get older in terms of gaining muscle and losing fat. Now, this is something that I get asked about all the time because many guys and gals think that if you're over a certain age and you're not already in great shape, somewhere in the 40s seems to be the usual kind of cutoff that people have in their minds. And people think that you're basically screwed. They think that you will not be able to build any muscle to speak of and that you'll probably get hurt trying and that your metabolism is basically just on a downward spiral and it's going to grind to a halt and you're just going to be fat forever. Now, most of you probably know that aging isn't that dramatic, but, physiologically speaking, things don't change nearly as much as you probably think. I mean, you can't necessarily get away with as many shenanigans in your 40s as you can in your 20s, but you absolutely can train hard and build your best body ever. And that's really what Jeff breaks down in this interview. I mean, we touch on many things ranging from how to know when you're under-recovered and how to recover faster. And those are very important points because that is the main thing that changes as you get older is your body's ability to recover from your workouts diminishes. We also talk about how exercise selection changes as you get older or how it probably should change or just will need to change in many cases, how to periodize your training, how to deload, and a lot more. And this is a good interview to listen to regardless of your age too, because if you're like me, your goal is first and foremost longevity. I mean, sure, we want to gain muscle and lose fat as quickly as possible. We want to look a certain way as soon as possible, but we also want to be doing this for the rest of our lives. And that mainly boils down to not getting hurt and not getting burned out. And that's really what this discussion is all about. So I hope I have whetted your appetite for it, and let's get to it. Jeff, thanks for taking the time to do this. So you're number 3 from 3DMJ to first was Eric and then Andrea, and now the patriarch.
Yes. Hey, it's a pleasure, but man, Eric gets first dibs. Man, I don't know.
Yeah, no, he was great. He was fun to talk to. It's just, I've been a fan of his work. I have recommended, his books and his research and stuff. So it was cool to talk to him.
Oh yeah, he's 12 years younger than me. And I've been around a lot longer, but I've learned so much from him. That's really kind of helped this last leg of what I have left in this sport. So he's a good dude.
Yeah, he was fun to talk to. All right, so let's just give everybody a quick little preview of what we're going to be talking about, which is a subject that I've been asked quite a bit about. I get emailed on it pretty frequently. I even actually just recently sent out a survey kind of just asking people, how can I do what I'm doing better? What are some things that I haven't covered extensively enough? And this area of longevity is one of them. So I guess there's kind of 2 facets to it. There's the longevity. So you have people that are maybe in their 20s and 30s that are looking forward, saying, hey, I want to be able to do this when I'm 40, 50, 60. And then people that are 40, 50, 60 that either, in most cases, they're newer to it and they are kind of like, they usually are wondering, is it too late? That's kind of their first, a lot of people asking that. And then people that know that it's not too late, wanting to know how do they reduce the risk of injury and how do they stay healthy? And, they figure they can't go at it in the way maybe they did in college. Things are probably different now. So, And it's good because I've written a little bit about this, and I actually spoke with Mark Ripito about it I don't know, maybe 6 months ago. And he's always fun to talk to, but he gets off on tangents. So I think there was some, you know how he'll go, he'll just start ranting on things, which I think I mean, I love talking to Mark. I think he's hilarious. But, I was excited to talk to you about this because I know this is what you live, not just personally, but, through your coaching. Who better to talk to than people that, when you're coaching competitive bodybuilders, and these are guys and girls that are really taking this sport to its extreme. They're putting their bodies through a lot more than what the average person has to do. So if you can help them do it, then you can definitely help the everyday person that just wants to, be in great shape for the rest of their lives, basically.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's the mentality I've had, like early on versus now, like early on, let's say in my 20s versus now in my mid 40s. Yeah, the mentality and the approach is a lot different. And I think that plays a big role with longevity. Like early on, I was a pretty intense trainer. Like I came from the Dorian Yates, Mike Mincer, which was basically, low volume, but taking everything to extreme failure. And basically I was, running myself into the ground, like literally every workout, every set, every rep. I mean, I made sure that everything was counting, and I got pretty lucky that I didn't get any major injuries early on. So I kind of feel lucky now, like looking back in hindsight, that I made it through that. But I can only
did a bit of
imagine.
that when I was younger. I mean, I'm not. I mean, whatever. I'm 32, but 10 years ago, I remember I used to go into the point of like mental failure. Like it's beyond physical. It's where mentally you can't even conceive of doing another push-up, let alone a bench press or something.
Yeah, like when I'm talking failure, like I would literally take like the positive reps, like I can't do another rep. But then once I completed that last rep, then it was like a static hold. So holding it as long as you possibly can until you're just basically done.
Yeah.
And that's how intense I was. So like a lot of times now, when I talk about this subject, usually like on Instagram or the social media outlets, I always get some of the younger crowd that kind of like looks at me like, you're soft, or you're not hard enough, and things like that. It's just I've learned to really train a lot more intelligent over the years, so I can stay at the top of my game like I am now. Still training at a high level, still competing at a high level, into my mid 40s.
Yeah. So I guess that's just kind of a segue into some of the key lessons that you've learned. So how do things look now versus then, and what does that mean training smarter? Because it's also just talking about that super high intensity kind of training. That's something that I get asked semi-frequently about. Like, what do I think about that as a viable, not just for bodybuilding, but for people, because I deal more with people, just everyday people that want to get in shape, as opposed to the competitive crowd, which you obviously specialize in. So how have things changed now, and then looking even forward? So you're looking forward for the next 20 years. Like, what does that look like in terms of training and recovery and diet, and just the kind of questions that people have that don't know. What is too much? What's too little? What should they be doing?
Yeah, it's hard to say because it's very individual, like what people can tolerate, the intensity levels, and actually the amount of volume that you can handle. Like we hear a lot, volume. That's the key for progress and growth, but you have to be able to recover from it. And what I'm noticing with myself, especially as of late, like the last year, I'm running into a little bit more aches and pains, and it's getting harder to recover from workouts. So I've had to be a little bit more strategic as far as giving myself a little bit more recovery days. So now I'm kind of like training one day, taking the next day off, just so I can recover. Because what I was noticing was I was training a little too frequent, and it just was like feeling beat up and run down far too much.
And how does that, how, just to be specific, because that's something that, again, that's a point of like, what does that look like for you? At what point were you like, no, this is not just me being soft, this is me under recovering?
Yeah, because you'll hear like there's no such thing as overtraining.
Exactly.
But, I mean, there is. I mean, you can definitely get run down. Like when I start experiencing like I'm just not motivated to go train, or I'm in pain most of the day, like I'm just achy and tight, and I'm like, okay, I'm probably doing a little too much here. And quite often, when I do work with, let's say, a new athlete, that comes in, they apply, And, we have a breakdown of, we ask how their training is, what their intensity levels, the volume, and, what their setup is like. Probably I would say a good 70, 80, 90% of the time I'm lowering down people's volume. And the first thing is fear. It's like insecurity and fear. Like, okay, if you're taking away work, then I'm not going to progress. But often it's like my poor ex-wife. But basically it's a story of like, I was married for 20 years and I thought that was a good marriage. I thought that's what was normal. And It wasn't until I actually got out of the marriage and I look back in hindsight now that I'm married for the second time, happiest I've ever been in my life. I look back and go, wow, that first marriage really wasn't what it was supposed to be. So sometimes removing somebody out of their current situation and putting them into a new situation, they could kind of see things a lot more clear because they're looking at it from the outside, looking in.
Sure.
So a lot of times we can make progress with less, but it's just getting people to, accept or embrace that change. Like, sometimes better is better, not more is better.
Right.
So, yeah. So for me personally, it was just like I was doing too much, and that can change. Like I can go, train for a month, training 3 days a week, and all of a sudden I'm recovered. I'm like, okay, I'm feeling really good now. Okay, now I could take this maybe for the next month. Let me see if I could add another training day in, or maybe add a set here, maybe a set there, maybe throw in a couple more exercises. So you tend to overreach a little bit, and then you're like, okay, it's going to accumulate again. That fatigue is probably going to accumulate again at some point. So I'm going to have to back off. So it's basically periodizing your training. So just, picking your spots when to push, picking your spots when to back off.
And would you say I hate to say like getting, listening to your body, quote unquote, but there's something to be said for, I guess, getting a feel for your body and knowing, like you were saying, at what point can you push it and overreach, and at what point, I know I've run into it in my training where like I'm not exactly feeling like I'm up to it, but I feel like I need to, because I haven't in enough time. Like I feel like enough time has gone by where I haven't really tried to push it, and and then it turns out I was right, and everything just feels way heavier than it should be, and it just doesn't really go well. But I think I guess, would you agree that it takes time? It takes time training to get a sense of these things. I don't know of any like formulaic, like, ooh, then you can go X number of weeks. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. I wish could just give you some type of broad generalization. But really it's like kind of like you said, it's experience. You start learning yourself as you go. And I know when I work with athletes from the get go, it's like, I could set up this training program based off of their individual needs. And, when we write it up right there on the spot, in theory, it sounds great. You set up this plan. You're like, okay, here's the plan. But then you don't really know how it's going to unfold till they start executing.
Right.
So usually, a month, 2 months go by, then we have to reassess things, what's working well, what's not working well, and then make the revisions to kind of keep that person progressing and evolving. And sometimes, I've written programs where I've stripped the volume and we find out that, they recover really well and it's not enough. So we have to actually add volume. And there's other times where I made the right call from the get-go. I was like, okay, yeah, this person's like progressing so well, on less. So it's just a matter of setting things up, and then you actually have to run it and assess and see how it goes and make revisions based on what you're seeing. And I think, someone who's just starting out, they're really not going to understand how to make the right calls for themselves.
Yeah.
In most cases. And I think that's where coaching comes into play. Like I really don't recommend people just run out by like 8 or 12 week weight training programs. It's because you're just following something blindly.
Right.
Whereas, if you get an 8 to 12 week program, but you have someone helping you and coaching you through it, then they can help you make the assessments and then make the adjustments. Then you learn how to make those calls for yourself.
Yeah, and then hopefully by the end of that time, you're self-sufficient to some
degree.
But getting
back to it, it's just really no broad generalization how to, in my opinion anyway, how to have people know how much volume, what is enough, what's not enough.
Right.
Until they actually go through it.
Right. And to the point of aging, so what is the major thing then that changes as you get older? Because a lot of people, again, I hear from guys and girls that think that it's not, they think that really like once you get over, let's say 40 years old, your ability to gain muscle and strength just plummets and everything goes to shit, basically, is what they kind of think. And that's obviously not true.
No, I've made really good gains from the time I was like 38. When I was 38 years old, I competed in 2009. I was at 38. I was 38. I weighed 160 on stage. A couple of years later, I was 170, just as conditioned.
Yeah.
But it had more to do with not gaining muscle in the off season, because at that age, yeah, you're not going to gain 10 pounds of muscle as a natural lifter.
Sure.
It was more about the way I dieted, a lot more intelligent, took a more conservative pace. So I held on to a lot more muscle. But yeah, I mean, as far as like what I'm experiencing now, I'm 45. I like probably the last couple of years. This is more the recovery is probably more something I'm dealing with. Like I'm noticing that the recovery is not as good. So the aches and the pains are there. They're more prominent. Whereas like maybe in my early 40s, right around 40ish, I still felt pretty well. Like I could train hard and still recover decently well. But now it's like I'm noticing it's starting to slow down a little bit as far as recovery. But the actual performance, I'm still, gaining strength, and it's just dealing with these tiny little aches and pains that prevents you from performing well. Obviously, when your body is hurting you to push hard.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the biggest challenge. And I think so now it's like, instead of like thinking about, okay, what ways can I progress other than increasing, let's say, the load? It's like, okay, well, maybe I can do a higher rep range. So working higher rep range, obviously the load doesn't have to be as high, and you can still make good gains in higher rep ranges.
Sure.
So it's just one way to kind of take some of the stress off the joints. I've done a little bit of BFR training too for arms,
Blood flow restriction, just so for the people that are listening. I just
wrote
blood
about
flow
it
restriction.
Recently. Okay, yeah. So just basically, you don't have to work with heavy loads. It's just taking the stress off your joints.
Yeah. Rest pause can be good for that too, as I'm sure you know. I mean, if you don't want to, I mean, it's different than BFR. Obviously, some people are turned off by BFR just because it seems kind of weird, and
it can be like, see, like what's that? Even for me, when I first saw it, I was like, I don't need to do that, But that's when I wasn't feeling what I'm experiencing now. It's like, okay, it's getting a little bit harder to train now, so that it makes sense at times to do things like that.
Yeah, sure. And are there any other things that you've found just help you recover faster? Are you finding that you need more sleep, or has that not changed?
I do notice that this with other athletes that I work with too, is just stress levels plays a pretty big role as far as performance in the gym and recovery. Like I notice, like when I'm under a little bit more life stress, that my performance, it tends to suffer a little bit, and it's just I don't recover as well. Obviously, higher stress levels are going to do that.
Sure.
So same thing with athletes I've worked with. A lot of times, if they have, let's say, college exams or college student, got college exams coming up. They got they're working, part-time, full-time at the same time. Maybe their girlfriend issues or whatever, boyfriend issues. I mean, that stuff plays a huge role in training and all that. And so, I think keep trying to keep as much handle on stress is a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I've just for anybody listening, if you go to Muscle for Life, you search for relax. I wrote an article a bit ago on just like some simple evidence-based, like some ways to lower cortisol levels, essentially, that have some science, that aren't just like take weird supplements, but things that you can, good bedtime routines and good sleep hygiene and stuff like that matters. I know a lot of people like meditation. It was never really my thing, but it seems to help some people.
Yeah, I've never meditated, but I definitely, like when because I'm pretty aware. I'm doing this for so long. I'm pretty aware, like when my stress levels outside the gym is pretty high, that I know, okay, I need to probably tone things down in the gym. Because if your body's under a lot of stress, both physical and mental, you're more susceptible to injury.
Yeah.
So I definitely make sure I'm aware of, like, when my stress levels get kind of high, that I tone like intensity down in the gym, or I take a day off here and there if I need it. And I think that's even when your stress levels aren't that high, if you're experiencing like some extra fatigue and all that, I never fear like taking a day off from the gym.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. It's something I even myself have kind of had to force myself to learn, just because it's, again, I mean, okay, fine, I'm 32, but I work a lot. I don't sleep that much. I don't go crazy with my exercise, but I don't feel like I'm particularly stressed. But I'm sure my body is. I feel like I kind of push it, and it's different now than it was 5 years ago. I mean, even just I I feel like 5 years ago, I had the same type of lifestyle, but I could go real hard and heavy always in my training, and I never noticed anything. It was just like,
Yeah.
and now I'm starting to notice a little bit. So it's been an interesting transition even for me, where I'm like, I think I'm going to go, even just the idea of like, I think I'm just going to work in like the 10 to 12 rep range today, because
Yeah.
because I think I need to, you know what I mean? Or I think I'm just gonna go for 4 days this week. So I think for people listening, you have, like, it's good to want to push yourself, but it can be weird because then, like you were saying earlier, you can feel like, am I just being soft? Am I just being lazy? Do I need to just like shut up
Yeah.
and do the work? You know?
Yeah, because usually, like, I guess there's two sides to the coin to this. Is like, I guess sometimes people actually talk themselves out of not going to the gym when they probably could go to the gym.
Right.
So if you're doing that too frequently, then obviously you're not going to make too much progress doing that. So you kind of have to kind of differentiate between if you're just mentally fatigued, like, I just don't feel like doing it, or if you're actually really like physically and mentally fatigued. There's a difference
struggling.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No.
because the one experience I can share is that 3 years ago I tore my calf, and I didn't listen to my instincts. Basically, going into that workout, it was my first set of squats felt terrible, like awful. And I knew, I'm like, okay, I just don't feel it today. I feel off, but I'm like, okay, don't be soft, push yourself. So the ego got the better of me that day.
No pain, no gain.
So I got through my squats, got through my leg curls, and the whole workout just felt terrible and off. And then on my second set of calf raises, my calf just said nope, and it tore. So I just think, after going through that ordeal, and basically I was out at like 11 weeks, that anytime I feel off in a workout, like if I get to the gym, I just feel off, I stop. I just say, you know what, I'm just going to go back home. Like, I have a home gym. So I just say, okay, I'm going back in the house. And I'll just do this tomorrow because I'm going to be more rested. I'll have more energy, and I'm probably going to have a better performance when I'm more rested. So in a sense, quote unquote, I'm going to get more volume then by performing well the next day. So yeah, that definitely taught me a valuable lesson, especially. So that's sometimes I preach with a lot of younger guys is that if you want to make it 30 years like me, I mean, you can't just listen to your ego. Otherwise, you're going to get busted up and you're not going to make it. So that's pretty in my opinion, is to kind of listen to your instincts that are really telling you if you can or can't.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. What about warming up? Just in emailing back and forth, I thought that was a good point, and having a good warm up routine. What's your warm up routine like now? Did that change over time? Because the average like gym bros warm up is what, you just throw some weight on the bar and start going, right?
That's basically kind of what I do now, but it's kind of like gearing myself up to perform. So, like, let's say for example, I start out, it's an upper body day. I'm doing bench press first. I'll warm up with a bar on the bench. 3 or 4 sets of 20 with the bar.
Yeah.
So I'm getting pretty warm, with that. I don't do like a lot of the typical dynamic stretching and all that stuff. It's just whatever. Like if I'm squatting, okay, it's going to be body weight squats. 2 to 3 sets of 20 to get really warm. I might do a little bit of goblet squats, warming up, and then I'll do acclimation sets, which is basically just working with a light load and then just gradually increasing the load but dropping the reps down so you don't obviously burn yourself out.
Yeah, so just
getting yourself acclimated to a heavier load. So when you do your top sets, your body's ready to go.
Yeah.
When I was in my 20s, early 30s, it was just like you said, hey bro, let's get in there and just throw weight around.
Yeah.
So some people need more mobility work prior, some people not so much. But yeah, we definitely have Eric made a good video on warming up. So
cool.
that might be
where can people find that? At the 3DMJ YouTube channel?
Yeah, YouTube Team 3DMJ.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, it's I can't remember the video offhand, the name of it, but we could probably get the link for you and shoot it over to you.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I can post it in the description. And people that are familiar with my stuff that's exactly how I recommend they warm up. So a lot of people listening are going to that's what they do and that's what I do is exactly the same approach. So once I start hitting the heavy weights, like I'm ready to go.
Yeah, and even like jumping on a stationary bike 5-10 minutes prior just to get the body, get the temperature
up. Yeah.
So you're ready to go. Yeah. that works pretty well. And obviously it's not that impactful, so it doesn't tire you out.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say that I know it's a good idea, but I generally don't do that. I usually just start with the weights. It's one of those things where, like, I had some people, I'm like, just give it a try. If you like it,
Yeah.
then do it. Like, theoretically, it's a good idea.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll just drive to the gym with my heater on, and then so my body
But
feels fine.
there you go. Well, my garage in the summertime, it gets up. It's like 100 degrees. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's.
Where do you live?
I live in Stockton, California,
Oh, okay.
which is the Central Valley. So it gets pretty hot in the summer.
Yeah. Yeah. But you have the nice rest of the year climate.
Yeah, it's cooling down now. It's like we're about 80 today, so the gym is like maybe a few degrees cooler than that. So that's pretty nice.
Nice. All right. So what about exercise selection? So what does that look like as time goes on?
That could go for young or old. It's basically the way I kind of see exercise selection. You want to use exercises that are safe for you,
Mm-hmm.
that are comfortable, and you enjoy. I think those three things is pretty key, because obviously, let's say you're just not built for squats, then to force your body to squat when it creates pain or discomfort or it doesn't feel good, and it's obviously it's not going to be enjoyable like that. So you're going to end up getting injured, or you're just going to be like frustrated,
Yeah.
because it's just not going to be a lift that's going to go too well for you. So for me personally, for athletes I work with, that's huge. Like, I try to find exercises that are going to be safe, fun, but also effective. So it's going to give you the most bang for your buck.
And do you normally start with, like, okay, I would like you to be able to do these, here's kind of here are your foundation lifts,
Sure.
and it would be
Yeah.
nice if you could do these. If you can't, we
Yeah.
can work around it,
Yeah, the compounds, basically the bench, squat, deadlift, a row, an overhead press,
Right.
the core movements, and then we build around that. But that's not to say that, you can't progress using alternative exercises.
Sure.
So if you can't squat, leg press, hack squats, then things like that.
Yeah, front squats even.
But yeah, that's like one of the main questions I'll ask somebody before I start working with them is, any aches, pains, injuries, figure out kind of what they can or can't do. And then from there, it's like, what do they actually enjoy doing? Because chances are, if you give them something, I know for myself personally, if I do exercises I know I like, I'm going to stick with it.
Absolutely.
And
I mean, similar with
it.
dieting, right? I mean, that's like the old adage: the best diet is one you can stick to. I mean, that's true to a point. I think it applies to training too. I mean, I've said that many times. We're like, if okay, let's just say that this were scientifically there's no question that this is the best way to train to maximize muscle growth, but you hate it. That's a bad program for you.
I'd say probably you might follow it for a couple weeks, maybe a month, and you're like, screw this. And I'm going to go do something else. So, I mean, I could look at my last contest prep a couple of years back, and on paper, if someone looked at my spreadsheet, they'd be like, there is no way this dude got in that shape following this, because it's just, in science eyes, it's not the most optimal. But it was optimal for me because basically I'm a veteran. I've been doing this forever.
Yeah.
So everything that I did was based off of past history. So sure, I'll look at science and I'll go, okay, this makes sense. This is optimal. Can we apply this to this person?
Mm-hmm.
If we can and it works, great. If not, then we need to find something else that's going to get the job done. But yeah, I mean, adherence and sustainability, it comes down to enjoyability too.
Totally. Especially when you're talking longevity, because if you want to make it a lifestyle, it's hard to force yourself to do something that every day you just really don't want to do.
Exactly. You're going to be like, I can do this.
Yeah.
Even like right now I'm contest prepping, and I just wasn't having too much fun. Part of it was the aches and pains I'm dealing with. But the other part was like I was putting a lot of pressure on myself, trying to do better than the last time or try to, climb certain status. I'm like, wait a second, I'm putting too much pressure on myself. I'm not enjoying it right now. So I did a lot of soul searching in the last couple of weeks. I'm like, I just need to get back to having fun again. And so it's just totally changed my mindset. And I'm like, okay, now this week I'm starting to have fun again doing it. I'm like, okay, this is actually good again. So
I've heard a lot of professional athletes talk about that kind of thing, actually. I don't follow much sports, but I'm kind of into golf. So that's actually like where I've kind of heard from quite a few just top tier professional golfers that ran into that problem where they just were getting burned out on it and not having fun anymore because they're putting so much pressure on themselves and performance and they, winning and trying to do this or do that. And then coming back around to what you're saying, where like it was a relief for them. I can think of a couple that made comments along those lines to just be able to have fun again, to actually just be able to go out and play the game and enjoy it like when they were younger.
Yeah, I think you could relate it to just like maybe people that that kind of follow you. It's like even though it's maybe, let's say, not a high level competitive athlete, it's still they tend to put pressure on. Okay, I need to lose weight, or I'm trying to change my body composition or whatever. Yeah. That you put a lot of pressure on yourself to make that progress, and when you don't, if you put that pressure on, what's that do? It kind of elevates your stress levels.
Yeah.
And when your stress levels are elevated, that's when progress is harder to come by because your body's not in the ideal environment to make progress.
Right.
So that's what I was experiencing as of late, like putting just way too pressure on myself, trying to better my previous season where I did quite well. I'm like, why am I putting so much pressure on myself, just making this a miserable process?
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's just like I let go of that and I go, you know what, let me just focus on the process itself, enjoy it, and just let the progress follow. I think anytime we try to force progress to happen, again, the stress levels go way up. So I think it's huge to kind of keep, the mindset needs to kind of be a good one, a calm one.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. So what about exercise form? That's obviously also one of those things that when you see a lot of younger people just kind of, it goes by the boards, or it's just you get that weight, however you get that deadlift, however it gets. I don't care what happened.
I think it's pretty important. Obviously, if you're not doing an exercise correctly, especially a deadlift or a squat, I mean, you're more susceptible to injury. And I mean, you got two camps. You have one who's like, okay, form Nazis, where they're just like, okay, everything has to look super, super perfect.
Yeah.
And then you have other people who say, no, it's okay to be a little bit loose. I think, you can be a little bit loose, but as long as everything looks mechanically sound. I think if you're heaving, I mean, obviously if you're, your deadlift form is totally off, you're going to get injured. But if you're pretty sound, I mean, that's, in my opinion, that's your insurance policy to prevent injuries and for longevity. I think for me personally, I'm more kind of on the side of like a form Nazi. Like I try to keep everything pretty pristine. Same. So I'll never sacrifice load for form at all. Like priority for me, and with athletes, I always encourage them, like priority is form overload at all times. Anytime your form starts to break down at all, like you start using a lot of momentum or you're changing body English, it's too heavy. Just lower it down, clean it up, and then go from there. A lot of times it might seem like you're taking a step back because you're lowering the loads down, but I like to call it timeless form, meaning if you lower loads down, clean your form up, you make it timeless, then you're going to be able to probably increase your loads higher over time because you're using proper form. Because you're only going to go so far, especially like on a deadlift or squat or something like that. You're only going to go so far with crappy form.
Yep. Either you're just going to get stuck or you're going to get hurt.
Exactly.
I mean, I ran into that myself years ago when I finally first started like actually educating myself. And so I remember on my squat, so I had gotten up to 405 with shitty, 1/3 rep type nonsense. And it was years ago. And then I finally learned how to squat properly. I remember I had to go down to so I was doing like 405 bullshit reps for a few, and I had to go down to, I think it was 190. No, I think it was like 205 for like sets of 8 to 10 with proper form. I remember that. I was humbled.
Yeah. That's pretty key, is being humble in the weight room. Because again, if your form is on lock, I mean, you're going to prevent probably many aches and pains and injuries. But it's hard to keep. I guess I could say older people, but the younger crowd, it's like they tend to want to chase those personal records, the 1 rep maxes, and sometimes I'll see the form video or watching them do it in the form video, I'm like cringing, going, oh my gosh, that's an injury waiting to happen. And that's kind of like how I was younger. I had pretty good form in my 20s, But, I would get after it a lot more. So when I was trying to do those 1 RMs, the form would break down, obviously, using a heavy load like that, it's going to
Yeah, but
break down
you're
a
not
little
giving
bit.
up. You're like, whatever, I'm going.
No, so, I mean, a 20-year-old versus a 40-year-old, obviously your body's probably going to be a little more resilient when you're younger. But I would say I just got lucky. There was a few occasions where I'm like, okay, I got lucky.
Yeah.
Could have went the other way.
Yeah. And I think that speaks to the point of something you had mentioned earlier, which is patience. So like common reason why just people I talk to, why their form will, it'll slowly go out is because they want to see that progress, especially if I've seen it with people that are newer to weightlifting. And so they had a first year that went really well and they have their newbie gains. And, especially if they start out with doing everything more or less right. And then they're now moving into year 2 and things are slowing down and they're feeling impatient. So you can just cheat a little bit on form. And then all of a sudden you're still adding the weight as you were before. But, eventually, like you said, you pay the piper one way or another.
Yeah. I mean, you could definitely get injured like we talked about, but also too, I think form has, as far as development goes, like you could be shooting yourself in the foot as far as actual making good strides with your physique if your goal is, let's say, getting more muscle, especially with, like, let's say, back movements. How many times have you seen people who don't do a row correctly or don't do a pull down correctly?
Right.
You get the loads get way too heavy. You see a lot of momentum and swinging. You see a lot of the arms taking over, and they wonder why they have big arms but no back. So I think not just for health reasons and safety reasons, but also like as far as if you're trying to improve your physique, you want to make sure you're doing things correctly so you can maximize the targeted muscle.
Right.
Like
you were saying earlier, it's quality. It's the quality of the work matters, not just the sheer quantity of times you're moving your limbs.
Exactly. Yeah. And like you said early on, yeah, you might make these serious strides and gains, but over time, especially, I mean, if you look at someone like me who's been doing this for 30 years, that's going to slow down. And it's 30 years consistent. So it hasn't been like, okay, off and on. It's been consistent. So I know at this stage of the game, it's like trying to gain muscle. It's going to be really, really slow or maybe non-existent, so you have to be super patient and realize that you have to train smart and intelligently. And you have to factor too is that, like, I kind of look at it like it's like your body or your muscle. I call it like a muscle account, like a bank account. So every rep you're doing, it's like 1 penny deposited. And I think that's a mentality I take and try to teach to other people is that, each rep counts, whether you're having a great workout or an average one or even a shitty workout. You're still moving weight. It's still going to go towards your physique. It's going into your account. And I think a lot of times people, they get, like, if they're having a bad workout or, like you said, they get impatient and they want to throw the weight on or do more than maybe they should be doing, that it really isn't going to make you grow probably that much faster. If anything, you're just more at risk.
Right. I liken it to speeding, where like you don't really get anywhere that much faster by speeding, but you just increase.
No, you hit the red light, man. And what happens at the red light? The guy who's going 25 in the 25 zone catches up.
Exactly. But all you do is increase the likelihood that you're going to get a ticket. That's all you're really accomplishing.
Yeah. It's kind of like, because you get to the red light, you see the guy, the light turns red and they're frustrated. They're banging on their steering wheel. They're, like this. And then the guy that comes next to him drives up with a little cup of coffee and he's like, like that. So
I'll see you at the next light.
So patience, have some poise. And not only you're going to progress just fine, but you're probably going to progress a lot longer than the guy that's speeding. And you'll enjoy it more because you're more in control and in command of yourself. Yeah.
That's a good point. Random question that this is something I've been meaning to ask someone that would have some good insight on it. So is there something to be said for muscle density changing over time? You know what I mean? Is there anything to this? Is something I've actually tried to read about. I've tried to educate myself on, and I have never really been able to come up with anything.
We're talking about muscle maturity.
Yeah.
I think this question has been posed to even like Eric, the science guy, and it's I mean, we do know that the skin thins a little bit as we age. I think that probably has maybe a little bit to do with it, but a lot of it too is just training age. Like I've been training 30 years. So,
Yeah.
the muscle is just going to be more developed. Let's just say, for example, there's a 25-year-old who's trained 5 years. They're 6% body fat. They have the same amount of muscle as I do. And I've been training 30 years and we're the same level. We're 6%. I'm probably going to look leaner, even though I'm not on paper, just because of that training age, that density. And it's like you said, it's hard to explain. I can't really give you like a scientific answer of why that is.
Yeah.
But I can tell, like I can look at older guys, especially in my field, in natural bodybuilding, the elite level guys are usually guys in their 30s and 40s and even into their 50s. There are there's some exceptions where there's some 20-year-olds that are like a really high level at the top of the sport. But the majority of them, like Brian Whitaker, he's 40 years old. He's the world champion. Doug Miller, he's in his I think mid 30s, somewhere in there. Marshall Johnson is another one who's 56 years old. One of the best natural bodybuilders on the planet. And these guys just look denser and harder than the younger guys. And I just think it's just because there's just more time under tension, more training time.
Yeah, that's basically what I'd chalk it up to. It's something that seems to be an actual phenomenon. I just never had a good explanation for it because that's one of the things people ask about. And I'm like, I wish I had a good answer, but it seems like I can just tell you that when you have 10 years of training under your belt, you're going to look better than when you have 2.
And what's kind of interesting to throw out there, maybe help cure some insecurities, is that I could look back at like when I was in my early to mid 30s, compare it to what I'm looking like now, and the stage weight, body weight hasn't changed that drastically. Besides the 2009 to 2011, but each season I've done, it's like I'm like right around 170 pounds, but I look a little bit bigger, a little bit leaner and denser, and really the body weight's staying kind of the same. So it's like sometimes you can't quantify progress with numbers,
right?
And I think a lot of people are number chasers.
Right.
And if you're going to be in the sport for if you plan to have a lot of longevity, whether it's actual in sport or just trying to change your physique in general, sometimes it's just you got to go by the visual, measurements, the scale. I mean, you can use it as tools, but sometimes they just don't quantify things.
Yeah, ultimately, what you see in the mirror matters more than what the scale says and what
you could be 10%. You could say my goal is to get 10% body fat at this. I want to be this weight, 10% body fat. You get there, and then you look in the mirror and go, "Well, I still don't like the way I look." Those numbers mean absolutely nothing.
Absolutely, I totally agree. It's also, especially when you're talking body fat percentage, because no matter how you measure it, you have individual error rates that are, it can be anywhere from 2 to 5%. Even DEXA can be off. The only way you could ever really know would be to get dissected. So
exactly. So that the mirror never lies.
Yep. All right. So one last point I want to touch on, something you had mentioned, which is periodizing your training. So how do you? Obviously this can be a pretty complex subject, but just keeping, summarizing what is working well for you now versus maybe previously, maybe 15 years ago, you never really bothered with it and you just kind of went, balls to the wall all the time or whatever.
Yeah, basically I was going balls to the wall all the time, like back in the day. That was just no deloads or no light training weeks or anything like that. Now it's hard to game plan my training because I have to work around little aches and pains quite often. But the difference with me is like I have a lot of experience, so I can definitely manage myself day to day easier now than obviously when I had less experience. So it's more so like the athletes I work with, it just depends on kind of what the goal is. Like if we were getting ready for a show, then basically it's like, okay, I'm going to have set up blocks of training where we're deloading maybe every 4th week, every 8th week, 7th week, 6th week, just depends. And basically kind of paying closer attention to volume and the recovery. Because obviously when you're dieting for a show or dieting, your calories are lower, so your recovery isn't going to be as good as it was probably when your calories are higher, obviously.
Right.
So that's one way you kind of have to periodize. There's periodization for like obviously a contest prepper, but someone in general where you're not really trying to lean them down, like the calories are there to support the training. then you might be setting up blocks to train, like an intensity block where you're going pretty hard. And okay, we're gonna tone that down. Have a recovery block. Maybe we'll have another block where we go towards volume. So instead of focusing more so on loads, now we're going to try to increase volume versus reps and sets. There's just different ways to do it. Like you said, we could probably break this down for a good couple hours, in a sense. But in a nutshell, it's like you're just kind of game planning when you're pushing and when you're kind of backing off. Because if you're just, like you said, you're just going pushing, eventually there's going to be a breaking point.
Right.
And I think as far as long-term progress and long-term like longevity, I think periodization is definitely the way to go.
Yeah, absolutely. And so would it, just for, I guess, to throw a rule of thumb out there, I guess it kind of comes back to what you were saying earlier in the interview, which is listening to your body in a sense and knowing when it's time to dial it back. And like, for example, what does a deload look like for you?
A deload for me would be like, okay, like personally, the way I like to do for myself, I just lower some of the volume down. Yeah, like I'll try to keep the loads up, but just lower the volume down. Because what I've experienced with myself is if I lower the loads down, let's say for a week, the following week when I try to go back to push the loads up, it's like
everything feels really heavy.
It feels like a ton of bricks, and it usually takes me 2 or 3 weeks to get myself back. Whereas if I just tone the volume down, I get the recovery I need, but I'm still capable of maintaining my loads the following week.
Yeah, that's funny. I'm the same way. But you've probably worked with people that have no like. Same. I've heard from many people that, because I talk about some people, like depending on how you're feeling. So every once in a while, I just did it this last week. Actually, I just do no exercise for a week. I'll do it once every 6 months or so, and it just feels good. But I'll email with people that will do that every couple months, and they'll come back stronger. I'm like, well, whatever. Good for you.
That's another part of the periodization. Like you could throw in like transitional blocks, whether it's a week long or a month long, where you just swap out exercises to give yourself that break. Like if you've been deadlifting regularly for months, going away from the deadlift and doing like maybe a RDL or something different can kind of help.
Yep.
So that's definitely one way of deloading. Yeah, but I think what's common though is, like you said, like most people, I don't say most or majority, but quite a few that I've worked with, that lowering the loads down, it's usually like the wrong move. But like just lowering some volume down tends to do the trick. Yeah, and a deload could even be days off too. Let's not forget that. Like a deload could be like, okay, you take a few days off the gym, or even a week. Every 6 months you might, okay, let's take a week off from the gym. There's nothing wrong with that either. Because if you think about it, if you're going to be in this, we're talking longevity. So if you're going to be in this for the long haul, 30 years. Let's say you take a week off once a year or twice a year. I mean, that's like a drop in the bucket.
Yeah. It means
so
nothing.
People freak out when they take time off of the week from the gym. It's like, oh gosh, I'm going to shrink. I'm going to lose maybe, but it's not like it's not going to come back.
Yeah, I mean, especially you can't lose any muscle in a week. I mean,
unless atrophy takes longer than that. Yeah,
absolutely. I think this just off the detraining research I read, I think it's like at about 3 weeks of no exercise, maybe you can start seeing some drop off. But a week you'd have to eat like nothing. You have to start maybe if you fasted for 7 days and did no exercise.
Yeah, that's very unlikely. Yeah, but the atrophy takes a little bit longer than people think.
Yeah,
you might see flatness. Like there's a difference between flatness and actual real muscle loss. You'll probably see flatness, but muscle loss, maybe some strength loss, maybe.
Yeah.
But like a week or two later, you're like, okay, I'm fine.
Yeah, exactly. Awesome. Well, I think that's again, the periodization is. I don't want to try to dive too heavily into that, but I just wanted to touch on it so people can, they can also find a lot of good information on the internet on that. I don't know if you have stuff on your channel that they can check out, but I've written a little bit about it.
Yeah, if they go to the YouTube Team 3DMJ, they look at the muscle and strength pyramids that Eric Helms did.
Right.
He did one on training. It's an awesome series. So right there, it's like it gives you kind of the outline formula to weight training.
Perfect. All right. Well, I think we have touched on everything. Is there anything else that is sticking out that you don't think that that we should talk about before wrapping up?
No, I think we did a pretty good job of covering quite a few subjects in a short amount of time. Yeah. I definitely don't want to go catabolic, so to get some
Yeah, I need to get a protein shake. So it's been like 30 minutes. So
Right.
no, that's great. So then where can people find you? And, in terms of as a coach, if they wanted to talk to you about that, let them know, how can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, 3dmusclejourney.com. We have coaching services there. You go to Instagram, 3DMJ Godfather, and then Jeff Alberts on Facebook. And then I also have a series on our YouTube channel, which kind of just follows. Right now I'm prepping, so it just follows the journey.
Awesome. And I'll put all the links in the blog post and in the description so everybody can find it easily.
Cool. Appreciate it.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks a lot for taking the time, Jeff. This was great. I think people are going to like it. I think they're going to find it very helpful because, again, these are all just things that I've been asked many times. So it was nice to just give you the questions and let you explain.
Perfect. All right, man. Hopefully it helps.
Yeah, absolutely.